good evening and welcome to Sunday Politics live on Channels Television. I'm Kaido Kikilu here in Lagos. Well, by this time tomorrow, the Lagos State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal is expected to have decided the fate of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu's election victory. That's in the petitions filed by the governorship candidates of the Labour Party, Gbadebo Roads Vival, and that of the PDP, Olajide Adediran, popularly known as Jandor. Well, the Justice Arumashom-led panel communicated this message to parties some days ago. Now, the LP and the PDP candidates are challenging INEC's return of Mr. Sanwo-Olu and his deputy, Obafemi Hamzat, in the March 18th governorship elections in Lagos State. But let's break down the petitions, shall we? This is the result as pronounced by INEC. But first, take a look at the petition which was filed by Mr. Adediran and his party, the PDP. He's asking the tribunal to disqualify Governor Sanwo-Olu and Hamzat and return him as a person with the highest number of lawful votes cast at the Lagos governorship election. In the petition, they argue that Governor Sanwo-Olu and his deputy were at the time of election not qualified to contest. They also submitted that Rhodes Vival, that's the candidate of the Labour Party who scored the second highest number of votes, was at the time of the election not qualified to contest. Add to that the ground of non-compliance with the Electoral Act 2022 and the guidelines of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and they insisted that there were differences in the names submitted by the governor and what WIC list showed. So that's for the PDP and its governorship candidate. Let's take a look at the petition of the Labour Party, that's Gbadebo Roads Vival, the candidate in that March 18th election. So these are the grounds. He filed as a sole petitioner, by the way, and he listed 3 grounds on which the petition is based. He alleged that Mr. Sanwo-Olu was not qualified to contest the election at the time which the election took place. According to him, the election of Mr. Sanwo-Olu was invalid by reason of corrupt practices or non-compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act 2022 and the Constitution. He also added that the governor-elect was not duly elected by majority of the lawful votes cast at that election. So that's essentially a brief overview of the cases that the tribunal here in Lagos will be deciding on tomorrow. It looks like it's going to be a long night for the major parties that are involved in that election. But stay with Channels Television. We'll be bringing you minute-by-minute update as it happens at that petition. So put that on the one hand. Tonight, we're going right into the heart of President Tinubu's policy thrusts. It is fundamental to the development of any nation, and we're keeping with our role of setting the agenda for the good of our nation. But first, let's tell you that over 20 female students of the Federal University Gusau, Zamfara State are still in captivity. Well, 30 of them were originally abducted, according to reports by terrorists at their hostel 2 days ago. But the military, thankfully, was able to rescue 7 of them. And today, the president has directed security agencies to rescue the remaining female students as it condemned the reprehensible act of abduction, saying that there is no moral justification for such heinous crime against victims whose only offense was their pursuit of quality education. According to the statement which was released by his spokesman, Ajuri Ngelale, the president commiserates with the students' families and assures them that no effort will be spared in ensuring their safe return. But that's not all. The last part of the president's statement is what leads into our conversation tonight. Now, he ended that statement by saying, take a look at what the president said at just the last paragraph of that statement, which was released earlier today. He says that the federal government is determined to ensure that educational institutions remain sanctuaries of knowledge, growth, and opportunity, and totally free from the menacing acts of terrorists. So our focus tonight is the education sector. It's been called the bedrock of any society. If any society fails at education, the result can only be imagined, and we do not hope that for our country, Nigeria. We're joined on the program tonight to take a look at the education sector, particularly the tertiary education sector. Professor Emmanuel Osedeke, who is the national president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities. Well, we understand that he'll be joining us soon enough on the program. But let's switch gears, still staying on the education sector. Let's speak with another union still in that sector. It is a union known as CONUA. Well, it is not as old as ASU. It is not maybe as big as ASU, but it looks like CONUA has been making some moves right after it was registered by the federal government and that court pronouncement. Let's speak with Dr. Niyi Simono, who is the president of the Congress of University Academics. He joins us live from Ile-Ife in Osun State. Well, good evening, Dr. Simono. Thank you for joining us on Sunday Politics.
Good evening, and good evening, Nigerians. Thanks for having me this evening.
Right. So we're hoping to have a rounded conversation around the education sector, President Tinubu's policy, his agenda for the education sector. Over 3 months now since he's been in power, has anything fundamentally changed? What is the fate of Nigerian students who are watching us tonight, their parents, and all in all, the future of our nation? But let's begin with that sad story playing out in Zamfara State. I wonder if you are following that, because I imagine that what affects students should naturally affect the lecturers, the teachers. Is that something you're following up with? The president has said that it is not an offense to seek education. So what is it that you know and you expect from government on the kidnapping of the Zamfara students?
Yeah, once again, good evening, and thank you for having me. It's the event in Zamfara leaves a very sour taste in our mouth, because no society can develop without education. And no society, no country can grow beyond its ivory towers. So we welcome the directive by the President, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, on directing the security agencies to fish out the perpetrators and bring back our students. Without students, there will be no lecturers. There will be no researchers. And it's sad that when our students go to school, they feel unsafe, and there's no learning. There can be no learning without an environment with ambience, an environment that will guarantee safety. That is when you can commit yourself, totally concentrate on what you have to study, what you have to learn. So it's a sad development. It puts the country in a bad light. And the earlier the students are brought back to the schools, to their parents, the better for our universities, the better for this country. So it's a very bad development for us. It's something that we don't really approve of, what we don't like at all.
Well, schools are going to be resuming. Some other schools will be resuming, and we'll get to that, but particularly on security. So how should parents, students, feel now resuming for education, which the president has said should not be a crime anyway? How should they feel? What more must the government do to secure our schools, ensure that the students learn, and not just learn, at least they can learn with peace of mind?
I think pragmatic steps must be taken by the government of today to calm frayed nerves, to appeal to the mind of students and parents that steps are actually being taken to ensure the safety of students on campuses in Nigeria. Without these pragmatic steps that will involve the presence of security operatives in our universities or around the campus of the universities, and some other measures that will be obvious to even not so discerning minds, that will calm frayed nerves with respect to giving students some succor, so that they can see that they are free to go about their businesses, they are free to go about their learning without any fear. So the government must do this as a matter of urgency. And there will be this more assurance when these students that have been abducted are returned to schools and their parents without further delay.
Well, that is our hope, and I imagine the hope of Nigerians who are watching us tonight. But so let's get into the other areas of education at large, while we'll, of course, keep our eyes on what's played out in Zamfara State. But first, the state of the unions, the academic unions in universities. Is ASU and CONWA, do you still regard yourself as rival unions? What is the state of unionism in universities now, with CONWA now in the fray, with a lot of people having known ASU for decades now? CONWA, less than a year since its registration. So what is the relationship now, the state of unionism in universities?
At first, I'll look at this question from two perspectives. The first one is with regards to how we see how unionism should be played. As far as we are concerned, we have no adversary. We have common goal. Our perspective towards achieving the common goal may be different. The route may be different. So as far as we are concerned, we don't see any other union in the university as adversaries. The other side of looking at it is with respect to how the other unions in the university see us. We have no control over that. Whether they see us as adversaries, whether they see us in one way or the other, it is in their purview. But as far as we are concerned, the university Nigerian universities is our primary concern. What will make us as academics enjoy what we are doing as academics, enjoy our calling, is what we are bothered about. Our welfare, the welfare of our members, of academics, is what we are bothered about. Enabling environment in the university with respect to research and community service is what we are bothered about. So our perspectives in achieving that may be different. The approach to it may be different, and that is welcome. However, that is welcome for us. As far as we are concerned, when and the moment we're able to achieve conducive environment for learning, improved welfare for our members so that they are encouraged to do their work, they are motivated to do more than they can even give. So, we are ready to work with anyone as long as the interest of our members, the interest of academics are protected.
So, well, Dr. Simonu, quickly now, because we just had this conversation even with the Trade Union Congress and the NLC, and it's been said that it looks like CONWA may be lending itself to government's ploy to divide unions in tertiary institution, weaken ASU. I know that's a question you may have had to answer time and again, but particularly recently, you met with the Minister of State for Education, and a statement was put out at the end of that meeting, and it looked like you were singing from the same hymn sheet with the government on this, and ASU's position is well known. So what is it that you are trying to achieve, Dr. Simonu?
I need to get your question. Please, can you situate that question in perspective? With respect to what exactly, please?
Well, you had a meeting with the Minister of State for Education, am I correct?
Yeah.
Was ASU in that meeting?
Well, as far as we are concerned, CONWA delegates met with Minister of State for Education on Tuesday, 19 September 2023.
No, you didn't answer my question. I don't know if it's the network that froze or you're done. Was ASU in that meeting?
No. I said CONWA was in a meeting with Honorable Minister of State for Education.
Okay, meaning that ASU was not in that meeting, I imagine.
Yeah.
Right. So it's been said that, it's been quoted, you've been quoted to have welcomed the increment in salary. The ASU president has been quoted to say, well, they don't quite know anything about it. So when I say that, well, you seem to be on the same page with government, ASU is not. Those are some of the issues which I refer to. So how is it that You seem to have more information, or at least audience with government, more than ASU.
Well, I think the government will then have to respond to that question. As far as we are concerned, we are moved, we are saddened by the current state of remuneration for academics in the universities. Since 2009, academics have remained stagnant on one salary. It hasn't changed. Without recourse to inflation, in fact, in recent time, the excruciating pain associated with the removal of fresh subsidy, that wasn't even in contention too. So as far as we are concerned, increment in salary is a welcome development. And no matter how it is done, our people must be treated in a fair manner. They must be treated as human beings. This, anyway, has been on the table since last year. When the strike action was taken, and it was sometimes in September last year, the immediate past Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, announced that there was this increment of 35% for professors, 23.5% for non-professors. And then we were yet to be recognized as a union, and the union representing academics then rejected that, citing some reasons for the rejection. But when we became recognized as a union with legal back, and we had discussion with the immediate past Minister of Labor, Senator Dr. Chris Ngige, on the matter. And we even met some other government functionaries. And we saw reasons that we can take that. There's a saying in Yoruba that once you have an increment, put it in your pocket first. Then you start negotiating again. In fact, in the interview I granted, I did say that we don't reject this. We are not rejecting this. But this is not enough. It's like tokenism as far as we are concerned. So we want the government to implement this without further delay. Implementation with respect to payment.
Right. Pardon me. So when would you start receiving it? Add to that the 8-month salary arrears, which ASU and the NLC are fighting for. You know, the payments meant to have been made during that long strike. Have you also been receiving that as CONWA members? Because for ASU, it's still a major bone of contention.
Receiving the salary for the period of strike, 8 months, you meant to say? Is that what you're saying?
The 8-month salary, yeah.
Honestly, we are saddened with respect to that 8-month salary that was denied our members. Because right from inception, even though without legal recognition, without official recognition, we've consistently maintained that CONWA did not declare strike. We are shortchanged, we are pained that that salary, that 8 months was not paid to our members. And our members had wanted to work. In fact, in my university, the strike was declared 14th of February, 2022. Up until March, sometimes towards the end of March, that the university closed, the university administration closed the university, our members were working. Our members worked. So we felt pain, we felt shortchanged that the salary of our members was withheld. So it's topmost in our demand from the government. We have quoted relevant sections of the Trade Dispute Act on this matter.
In essence, you're saying that you... Right, so you're saying that you have not received that as well, right?
We haven't. I can confirm that to you, we haven't.
And also the increment, it hasn't kicked in just yet.
Yes, it hasn't kicked in just yet.
So let's talk about the president's education agenda, student loan, for example, that talks about improving education, particularly funding the infrastructure. I think we've talked about welfare, which concerns salaries, at least some part of it. So far, would you say it's been so far so good with the Tinubu administration's policies, the student loans, the infrastructure and education system? How do you feel as CONWA? Are you impressed? Are you hopeful?
For now, the obvious fact is that it's about talks. We haven't seen actions. And until we start seeing actions, we then begin to evaluate the actions. The student loan is about promises, is about pronouncements. We need to see it in action and see how it works. But with respect to the act of the Student Loan Act, we have looked at that act and we have made our objections known to the government at the summit held sometimes in August this year. Yes, sometimes in August this year. And part of it is the condition for accessing the loan. Part of it is the committee that will look at, that will consider those that will apply for the loan. Some unions were not represented there, and I must speak about my union, where union in the university recognized had legal backing. If any union would be there, we must be part of those that would look at that because we are a player in the university. So all these issues, when they take it on board and we start seeing the action, we can then evaluate the action. But so far, the issues we have with the Student Loan Act, we have put it back to the government, and we look to see what the government would do about it.
All right, Dr. Sumonu, final note quickly. What's your membership like? Just how big are you now? It's been months since you were registered. Are you swelling in numbers? Can you put a figure to it?
It's been a question that I have to contend with from time to time.
So let's answer it once and for all tonight.
Yeah, life evolves. The number you are trying to get is not stagnant.
As of the last check, what was it?
We started with 5 universities. Today, we are in 27 universities. I make bold to say I'm on the air on a national television.
Right.
And we are growing. We are not less than 5,000 in number. And we are growing. The moment, as we progress and continue to put out our ideals to the public, yes, is an option. And people will tend to see whether our perspectives are pragmatic, are reasonable, and whatever.
And that's a fine place to leave it, Dr. Niyi Sumonu. Thank you for the update, at least for your interactions with government and your expectations for that very important sector. We'd like to thank you for your time and wish you the very best on the program tonight.
Thank you very much for having me this evening.
Right, so let's switch gears now. Let's speak with Professor Emmanuel Sodeke, I should say, who is the National President of the Academic Staff Union of Universities. He now joins us live from Abia State. Thankfully, we're able to get him on the show. It's good to have you on the program, Professor Sodeke.
Thank you very much.
I imagine a lot of students, parents watching us and just imagining what is the fate of the education sector. I earlier on asked about the security aspect, and I was making reference to the abduction in Zamfara State. I don't know if it's also something you're following. I don't know if you've seen the president's statement and some of the activities of security forces. I imagine this also hurts you as a teacher. Is there anything that you'd like to say on that before we move into the issues?
Well, for us as a union, it's general. It's not just about students, it's about the staff, the workers, and everybody. We're under threat. And our own idea is that it's not peculiar to a session, it's the whole country. The country under threat, and our prayer is that the security agencies should do their work and ensure that people are safe. Nobody is safe anywhere, except maybe those who go around with a convoy of security aids and what have you. But the ordinary Nigerian, the lecturers, the students, the workers in the university system, the primary school, secondary school, we are all unsafe. And there's a need for the government to rebuild its security architecture for the safety of all Nigerians. And that's what we have on that. In general, our members are being kidnapped.
Oh dear. So when this government came into power, education was a big deal for it, at least in terms of the policies it put out on the table. And the president followed suit with the signing of the student loan bill into law. It became an act that was just in June or thereabouts. So it looked like there was a lot of activity. But as school resumes again, what can you tell us about the state of tertiary education in Nigeria today? Is it better than it was before this government came into power? It's been just over 3 months anyway.
The universities are never closed. We have been working overnight, even during the Christmas, to ensure that we meet up for the background of where we were. The time missed during the strike, we have been working on that. I know the universities are not closed. That is the correction too. Well, this government have come in. They introduced student loan, and for us, this has been on for a long time. 2017, when we started negotiation with government, this issue has been on, and our own idea is that the loan, when you are talking about student union loan, it has to be it has to be comprehensive. Now, there is nothing to show that it will work. There's nothing to show that it will work. So that's our view, that there's a need for a review, check what happened in the past, and see how we can move forward. But for us, our idea is that instead of calling this loan, let us call it a grant. It's a civil service government. This thing, if you look at the conditions, the 90% of the students will not have access to that loan. If you check the conditions, that you must have two parents who earn less than 500,000 per annum. How many parents? Where do you have that from? How many people earn less than 500,000 per annum?
Right, Prof, it looks like the connection is playing a fast one on us this evening.
But it's coming back.
If you can still hear me, so let's speak to these issues raised. We just spoke with the CONUA president before you joined on the program, and he raised some issues. But regarding just what are the unions fighting for? What are you putting on the table on the side of ASU? Well, CONUA says, well, these are what he called pragmatic approach that it is taking to ensuring that the education sector is better at the tertiary level. ASU is also doing its own thing. And I asked him that how is this then working together for the tertiary education system in Nigeria? Do you think that CONUA, ASU is good, existing on their own? What exactly will come out of this, Prof, really?
Well, I won't talk about CONUA because, as far as concerned, we are in court with them on their legality. So until that court, in appeal court, until that issue is settled, we'll not talk about CONUA. But for us to go around Nigerian universities today, and it's very clear, what are the infrastructure? What are the academic staff salaries? These issues are what we have been fighting for over the years. These are the issues we have been fighting for over the years. And the government is not going to be listening. On this issue, in 2017, the government set up a negotiation team to negotiate with us, chaired them by Dr. Babalaki. We spent 3 years and we couldn't arrive at a solution. Then that committee was dissolved. Another one set up chaired by Muzali Jubril was set up, and we reached an agreement in 2020 for the government to go look at it. If there are issues, they come back to us, and then we'll sign. But it took 1 year and a strike before the government came back to us and dissolved that committee again, and appointed another one here by the late Professor Nimi Briggs. And after a very serious negotiation, we had an agreement, which both sides were supposed to sign. And suddenly from nowhere, the then Minister of Labour and his group came on air and said, we have awarded the university 23.5% junior lecturers, lower lecturers, and 35% for professors. And we said that is not the basis of the principles of collective bargaining, which Nigeria subscribed to as a member of NLO. So that is where we stopped that time. That if we have to reach an agreement, it should be an agreement on both sides and not an award. But in order to give an award to somebody, you can also withdraw the award at your own instance. But if it's an agreement, both sides have to maintain the agreement. That was where we deviated in 2022. That today, when this new minister came in, and he said as a way of starting, that is the Minister of Education, of starting a process of having a peaceful universities, we should allow him to implement this while the process of negotiation continues. I think that is where you have this issue of 23.5 and 35.5. That is the origin. We also met with the minister, the two ministers, not Minister of State. We met with the Minister of State, informally, the Minister of Education, both of them. So if that is the way they want to start, as long as the principle of collective bargaining is still in place, the agreement we have reached is still going to be studied by the government, then they can do them and what they have done. That's where we are.
So regarding the salary increment, you're saying that you welcome this, but this is not what you're asking for, or at least it doesn't capture the issues on the table. Am I correct?
You are right. Since 1990, our agreement, our salary has been based on agreement between both sides, that even if the government leaves power, the next one comes, there's an agreement you can look at and implement.
All right. So, Prof, what are the issues still at stake? What are the outstanding issues? If you could just list them quickly for Nigerians. So we're all on this table together anyway, so we know the issues at stake. What are they?
One is the issue of funding. When you go to Nigerian universities today, the funding is low. And we have said this, go around Africa, you can Google it. The least country in West Africa give 12% of their budget to education. But the last regime, it gave 3.8%, the lowest in the world. And we are saying that this regime, with their background and the ministers, people we are seeing around him, there is a need to go back to that document and ensure that at least 15 to 20% of our budget is given to education because of the importance of education in terms of security, in terms of manpower development, in terms of every aspect of the country. So that is easy. It's not talking about, I had a few people say, the university generates 50 billion. Nigerian university generates 50 billion. What do they use it for? And I asked myself, what is 50 billion? 50 billion divided by about 80-something universities you have in the country. What does that come to? So that is what we should be talking about. Let's increase our budgetary allocation to education.
Right. So
and
one is funded.
So
one is funded. There's a question of autonomy.
Yes. The second, yes.
That you want
the
autonomy.
Pardon me. Remuneration.
Remuneration, right, which we have talked about. So funding, remuneration, but particularly on funding. So how do you want it to work with autonomy if you're asking for autonomy, yet you're still asking that government fund universities? So do you want full autonomy as well? Because some will say if the government is funding education, then it should still have some level of control.
You see, we're having misinterpretation of what autonomy is. The Autonomy Act was signed in the year 2007, was signed. Autonomy is well defined by that law. When we say autonomy, we don't say government should not be part of the running of the system, that we should follow that law. That law is very clear. The number one person that runs the university is the president, who acts as visitor to all universities. He is a visitor to all federal universities, which is the president. When you look at that law, the president set up a committee, we call it a governing council, to run the affair of the universities. For that council, the government nominates 6 members, including the chairman. The university also nominates their people, and the community, which is the alumni, and the university also nominate people to serve in that committee. Then the law also indicates how that committee or that council will run. And at the end of the tenure of council, every 5 years, the visitor will now send a team to go and investigate how they have run the universities. If there are infringements, those who participated that are punished. That is what the law says. The autonomy does not, we didn't say financial autonomy, we said Autonomy Act 2007. It is there, having been passed by the National Assembly and signed by the president. So what would do? You see, let me give you an example. National Assembly is an autonomous body. Does it fund itself? The judiciary is autonomous. Does it fund itself?
Right.
And so forth and so on. So when you talk about autonomy, we should not be talking about privatizing universities. We didn't say privatize. When you say government should not fund, when you say the federal government should privatize the Nigerian universities, where is that done in any democratic country in the world? So,
Prof, let's take the other issues quickly as we progress on this conversation. So we've talked about funding. You've added autonomy and tried to clear the air on what at least that means from our side. Remuneration. What are the other outstanding issues, Prof?
The other outstanding issues are the agreement we reach. There are infringement in the system. I will give you a typical example. For now, no universities, no governing council can do investment with their fund, because they say every fund generated by university, everything must go to TSA and IPPIS. Therefore, if a university has 3 billion, instead of investing that money and getting money in return, they can no more do it, as it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The university can generate their money with the capital they have, but now everyone will go to the TSA and you can't invest. That's one of these things. That's the infringement on the autonomy. Today,
Right.
a vice chancellor, in need a good lecturer, cannot appoint a lecturer without going to get permission from head of service. Where in the world is that done? The boss of the university cannot pay salary of workers. You employ a seasoned lecturer, you have to go to Abuja with a private fund, stay in a hotel, go to the IPBIS office to get registered. And with what we are hearing about the IPBIS National Assembly, it tells you where we are.
Well, not to worry, we'll get Prof back to wind down on this conversation as we take a look at the outstanding issues.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right, so Prof, let's try to make the most of the connection. I don't know how many more issues are outstanding, but I wanted to get your reactions to some of the things that have been talked about of recent. First is, the president's statement, which he put out today. And I asked earlier about your overview of the education sector, just how much has changed, if anything has changed. And the president in his statement said that, there should not be such act of kidnapping on people whose only offense was their pursuit of quality education. And I want to know if you sort of agree with that statement. Would you describe education in Nigeria today as quality, at least for public education at the tertiary level where you operate?
I agree with the president and with all those agencies that everybody is at risk. The academics are at risk. And the worst thing is that many of us go to work with public transport.
So my question is about the quality of education, so we know where we're at.
The quality of education in Nigeria today is low.
So can you say that we have quality education in Nigeria?
For you to have quality education, you must ensure that our laboratories are functional. You must ensure that the classrooms are in such a way that students will sit in the classroom and have lecture in a conducive environment. Lecturers should not have excess students they are teaching. Today is on university. The ratio between students and lecturers should be 1 to 10, 1 to 15. But in some faculties today, in some university, the ratio is 1 to 50. So there has to be a good balance as you have all over the world. And that is why today you don't see students coming from outside to Nigerian universities. Not because of the quality of the lecturers or the quality of the teaching, but the quality of the environment. You don't have a university where you have 1,000 people taking lecture in one lecture room that can only take 200 students. And we have that well documented in the need assessment report, which we have. And we government need to look at that report and see how we can revamp it as we have suggested in that report during the era of Goodluck Jonathan. And they agreed to release some money to the university to ensure that this infrastructure are bring up to such a level that we can have students coming all over the world, having lecturers coming from all over the world to teach in Nigeria. I think that is where we are.
So let's wind down with this, Prof. The Minister of State for Education put out that statement, and it's interesting to hear that you've also met with the ministers, and he appealed to students, parents, and lecturers in institutions of higher learning to shun acts that are capable of disrupting the academic session. Is that to say maybe the minister is suspecting that you are planning another strike based on some of these outstanding issues? Is that something that is in the offing?
Well, you see, the Minister of State for Education should look at it from both sides. If students, lecturers, and the community should not do anything, the government should also do its own part. Very simple. Today, universities are arbitrarily increasing tuition fee, the school fees. They are increasing tuition fee. Is that correct? In an environment today where the minimum wage in Nigeria is 30,000 naira per month, where they have to pay rent, pay heavily for transportation, and you are forcing this thing on the students. Let me give you that. As a result of this, and I can assure you can check, if nothing is done about this heavy fee being introduced all over the country today, in the next 2 or 3 years, more than 40 to 50% of these students who are in school will drop out. And when they drop out, they become a big field for recruitment by those who want this country to be ungovernable. So that's what we are saying. Create the environment we have in the 60s, 70s. When I was a student, the government was paying me for being a student. Let's have an environment where the children of the poor can have access to education, not closing them. If you pay school fees of 300,000 naira, how can the children of somebody who pay 50,000 naira a month be able to pay such fee? So we need to look at all of them. That's why I'm talking about this government with their background should increase budgetary education to at least 15% from the present last year 3.8 to generate enough money to fund the system so that we don't have this ICL until they're dropping out from school.
Well, we have to anchor at this point, Prof, but certainly a very dire picture you painted, and we certainly do not hope that will be the case. That is why all hands must be on deck. But we'd like to thank you so much for joining us on the program, Professor Emmanuel Osodeke, the National President of ASU. We wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Well, we'll go to break now. Having paid attention to the bedrock of a society, we'll turn our attention to the courts now. There have been lots of judgments coming out of the tribunal, but then there have been issues raised by legal practitioners. We'll take a look at one of them in a moment. Stay with us. Hey, welcome back. Well, this past week saw a series of governorship election petition judgments. Well, aside the upset in Kano, the other states maintained status quo, so to speak. But that doesn't mean the judgments were widely accepted by all parties involved. In fact, majority of them are heading to the higher court to seek redress. Now, one of the cases a lot of eyes were on is that of Enugu, where the court upheld the election of Governor Peter Mba of the People's Democratic Party as a winner of that March 18th election. Now, there are those who raise issues with that judgment. So let's get some more insights from a legal practitioner who joins us right here in our Lagos studio, Mr. Enibe Effiong. It's good to have you tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So there were two major petitions that were decided on, particularly for Enugu, that of the PRP and the Labour Party against the election of Governor Peter Mba. And I don't know, but for lawyers specifically, you're bound by that judgment and, of course, the generality of the public because, hey, it's based on the Constitution of Nigeria. I don't know if you've read the judgment, but if you have, over 140 pages?
145 pages.
145 pages. Yes. Does that put to bed some of the issues that were raised during the whole process of that tribunal up until the end? For you, that is.
No, certainly not. And I have reviewed the judgment. I have read it about 2 times, from page 1 to page 145. What makes the Enugu case one of interest is that, unlike petitions in many of the states, the Enugu petition raised issues that were germane issues that were recondite, issues that had strong constitutional flavor. And then particularly one where we saw, in not a very common way, an agency of the federal government, in this case the National Youth Service Corps, come before the tribunal, come before the court to give evidence in substantiation of the case of the petitioner, that is, in this case, the Chijioke Edoga, the candidate of the Labour Party and, of course, the Labour Party, to aid them in proof of the petition. Now, I have studied that judgment. I have tried to understand the jurisprudence of that judgment, the reasoning of my laws, and the basis upon which that judgment was given. And I say this with all sense of responsibility as the lawyer that, having read that judgment, there are several aspects of it that I have been unable to explain or that I am unable to understand. I'll give you one example. In consideration of the first issue for determination, the ground 1 of the petition, or the principal relief as it relates to the eligibility of Mr. Mba, the governor of Enugu State, or in this case, the candidate of the PDP, whether or not he had presented a forged document to INEC. The tribunal, in the judgment, considered that yes, that indeed Peter Mba had presented a certificate, an NYSC certificate to INEC. But the tribunal went ahead to say no, that because you don't need an NYSC certificate to become a governor, and because NYSC certificate is not the requirement under Section 177 of the Constitution, therefore he cannot be disqualified. With proper respect to my laws, I see that as, a way of giving judgment in a manner that does not reflect the spirit of the Constitution. And I will explain that to you. Now, you do not run for office simply because you have met the requirement of age, you are a member of a political party and you are sponsored by that political party, and, of course, you have attained school certificate level or its equivalent, and you are a citizen of Nigeria. These are the 4 basic constitutional requirements for most political positions. But that's not all. In addition to meeting the specific qualifying requirements, a person seeking to be a governor of a state in this case must also not be inhibited by any of the inhibiting or what I call disqualifying indices under Section 182. The one that is material for consideration here is that the Constitution says unequivocally that you will not be qualified to be governor of a state, or you shall be disqualified from being governor of a state if you have presented a forged certificate to INEC. So now, the question is, did Peter Mbah present a certificate to INEC? In court, their lawyer said, that from Isinai, right, from the particulars of parties that he submitted, he filed, and of course the affidavits, the form that they filled, that he did not specifically mention NYSC certificate. But the question is, did you present? What is presentation? Presentation is handing over. There was no dispute. Evidence was adduced that indeed he had presented certificate to INEC. Right. And NYSC, the issuing authority came to court by their PW1 to say that this certificate did not emanate from them. Right. But of course, the tribunal went ahead to say, that because his statement on oath, his deposition, was not front-loaded at the time of filing the petition, therefore they cannot discountenance his evidence.
Let me come in here, Mr. Effiong. By the way, we also reached out to the governor's team, the legal team as well, to, of course, get some representation on this. But as of now, they're not available. But let's backtrack a bit, and this takes us back to July during the proceedings of this tribunal. I don't know how closely you followed it. You will recall that the DSS was also present in courts. Do you recall that? And this was a statement made by Mr. Mohammed, who spoke for the DSS, saying that the failure of the NYSC to maintain a proper record-keeping system was the cause of its inability to trace Mr. Mbah's initial certificate, adding that it would be wrong for the NYSC to blame Mr. Mbah for its own failure in record-keeping. And that was the DSS, another agent of government, as you said.
Not the SSS.
Yeah.
It was not the SSS that gave that evidence. That evidence was given by a busybody, someone who had no business even attending the tribunal. What is the business of the SSS on whether someone was issued with an NYSC certificate or not? He could not present any document that the agency for which he works had even commissioned him to carry out that investigation. And why should it be the business of the SSS to investigate allegation of forgery? Does that condescend on internal security? If Nigeria were a serious country, that official would be facing internal disciplinary procedure.
Are you saying the
DSS the tribunal rightly, in this case, discountenance his evidence? I, for one, saw no basis for him even coming before the tribunal. The point is this. Peter Mbah had presented a certificate which he said NYSC issued him. And when you have an agency like the NYSC come to court to say we did not issue this certificate to you, I think that is evidence that should not be swept aside. Because what are we talking about? The Constitution does not say you should present, that you'll be disqualified if you present forged academic certificate, forged university certificate. It says certificate. Certificate. So having presented that certificate to INEC, I believe that the petitioner had made out their case. They had made out their case. And then you look at even other issues. What is the only sense of the NYSC? If you look at Section 2 of the Act, of the NYSC Act, you are eligible for NYSC if at the time of your graduation, you were less than 30 years. And it is supposed to be compulsory. So what is the basis for asking other Nigerians to enroll in the scheme? If someone can just come out and say, this is my certificate, even though the institution says we did not issue it. But guess what? That is not the only problem that I have with the judgment of my lords. That is not the only one. There is another aspect of that judgment that I am also unable to understand. And I say that with all degree of respect to my lords, which is that in their considered judgment, in their reasoning, my lords, the three-man panel, held that the testimony of certain material witnesses who came to testify that in the collation of results at the registration area, that is the word, that what INEC imputed in Form EC8B, which is supposed to be the word collation result, was different from EC8A, which is the polling unit result. My lord said, well, that because these witnesses of Labour parties were not accredited agents of Labour Party, they cannot countenance their testimony. I had thought that the law has always been, and the court has decided in Toti and Ukpabi, that what determines admissibility primarily, it is whether the evidence is relevant. But guess what? In the new Electoral Act 2022, Section 137, the National Assembly introduced a very radical provision that where there is original or certified copies of documents before the court or tribunal that can establish non-compliance, and that non-compliance is manifest on the face of that document, you don't even need to call oral evidence.
But I find it quite interesting, Mr. Effiong, that on the one hand, you say that the testimony by the DSS official rightfully discountenanced, but for the witnesses who the court said that, well, you were not accredited agent, so we cannot take this evidence, and the court discountenanced it. You fault the court for doing that. No,
SSS had no business. They are not the maker of the document.
Because you say that, you also said that the DSS did not send the man, if I got you correctly.
Yes, it was established. It came on its own.
So for the agents which you talked about, were they accredited by the party?
They are members of the party.
No, were they accredited?
They were present at the polling unit.
That duty?
No, they were present. Every voter in Nigeria is an eligible witness before a tribunal.
My question is, were they accredited to perform the duty which they were meant to perform there?
The judgment says they were not accredited by INEC. But the point I am making is that, in my respectful view, the issue should have been one, is their evidence relevant? Two, do they have a nexus with the petition? These were members of the party. And I went further to say that by virtue of Section 137 of the Electoral Act, a petitioner is no longer even required to adduce oral evidence where you have certified copies or original copies of documents that can establish non-compliance. This is one provision that I'm not certain that cognizance have been given to. And I am saying that because this issue, the evidence of these witnesses, I felt, with proper respect to my lords, were relevant, the court should have looked at it. But that is not even the end of the matter.
Right.
There are certain other aspects
we have to anchor now.
I am unable to explain.
But just to paint the full picture as well, the court eventually deducted some votes
51
from the candidates, saying that
51.
At least the ones that can be proven. But that's why law is interesting, the fact that you have a higher court to escalate this to, and of course we'll see how these issues played out. But thank you, Mr. Enibe Effiong, for at least providing some insight to your side, because this has been quite a big issue, really, both off and online. So thank you so much for the insights. We're speaking with Mr. Enibe Effiong, a legal practitioner on that case. Thank you for your time again.
Thank you.
Well, politics, always interesting. That's been the show for tonight, everyone. We're back tomorrow to give you the update on the tribunal in Lagos and other trending political stories across the country. I'm Kayode Kikilu. Thank you for watching. Good night.